Digitizing Delmarva's Heritage and Traditions. Today we're talking with Henry Shipley Parker about reminiscing about his life in Wicomico County. Henry Shipley Parker, we're delighted to be here today, and we want you to just start reminiscing way back at the beginning and tell us about your early childhood and all that stuff.
Well, I was born on Baker Street, East Salisbury. And they were the days that everybody was poor, but nobody realized they were poor. They worked for the railroad, they worked for R.D. Greer, they worked for E.S. Agins, C.R. Dishroom, and people always, the families always had it was great families in East Salisbury. And then my family moved around on Charles Street. And I stayed there until I went in the Army in 1942. But in the days in East Salisbury, us kids, was a watermelon patch between Naylor Street and Truett Street. In summertime, we'd go out there and get a few of them watermelons, and the man would come against us, after us. We'd run like hard as we could run, but said, we had a place that we could play baseball, and we had a place that in the spring or in the fall, we could play football. But everybody, just some good ball players in East Salisbury in those days. But everybody just worked, and the families did, and they made sure that they were good families. We never locked the door, never opened closed the window. In the summertime, in fact, half the time I slept out on the porch in our house where it was cooler. But East Salisbury was a great place to live. My dad taught the world of East Salisbury. Anybody said anything about East Salisbury, he was about ready to go after him. I can tell you that. He loved East Salisbury.
Did most people walk to work?
Well, everybody walked. Nobody had a car. My dad lived to be 85 years old, never had an automobile.
Wow.
And he said that in those days you walked because you didn't have enough money to buy an automobile. He had to find something to eat and keep you warm. And we had a little bit of clothes that we wore, but we didn't have a lot of clothes. We didn't have anything in those days. But everybody was happy, and everybody lived together, and they helped each other. The families helped each other in East Salisbury, and it was a great neighborhood, and had a grocery store on every corner. You didn't have any. The only supermarket that they ever had, they started at Isabella Street and Church Street and the Acme people. That was the first one in that brick building there. That was the first supermarket, I guess you'd call it, what you call today, that started in East Salisbury. And Mr. Joe Davis, he's the one who we'd go with. That was our grocery store. And my dad run a little short of money. He said, "That's all right. You're going to pay me. Don't you worry about it. You go ahead." And we always had something to eat. But the families were just great people.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Wicomico High School, and that's the only high school we had. We started at, I went there for 5 years. I had one teacher, thought maybe I needed an extra year, so I stayed around. But I do want to tell you about the softball team that I played on in 1938. At the high schools, you had a softball tournament every spring, and we had defeated every county in the Eastern Shore except Centerville, Queen Anne's County. So we went to play them on one Saturday morning at Hurlock, and we defeated them 1-0. So we won the Eastern Shore champ of softball in 1938. George Hill was the catcher. His father was the undertaker. And Dow Holt, he was a good pitcher. He'd throw that ball right through there, I tell you that. And he went on to be a conductor from Washington to New York on the passenger line. And the shortstop, he worked for Coca-Cola, and the third baseman was named Smith. And I think he turned out to be a dentist, really.
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you, I played shortstop. Don't look at me today, but I played shortstop, and because I think I was tall, Mr. Hearn, he was a coach from Hebron. And he was
Milton
our coach.
Hearn?
Milton Hearn, he was our coach, and that was a good team. Anyway, I graduated, and of course, didn't have any money, didn't have anything. I couldn't go to college, so I had to go to work at E.S. Aikens, and that was 1939. So I went to work at E.S. Aikens, and
E.S. Aikens was located where the building is today, I guess.
that's right. Then you had, of course, Route 13 hadn't been built in that time, and the lumber where that motel is had stacks of lumber, or all there, and they had 2 or 3 other, and they had carts that you'd load up on, and the mules would bring the lumber into the mill, to the big mill, and then all the men that worked there, they had to push the lumber into the mill, and had a barn there, and they had 4 mules and a horse there, and the rats was about 6 inches long, and there was corn there where they fed all the mules and everything. And of course, when they built Route 13, Aikens cut half their building off, and they did away with the barn and all that kind of stuff, because then the Ford tractors come in. They started using Ford tractors in those days. Mm-hmm. But I stayed with Aikens until I was in 1942, and then I was 20 years old when they drafted me. I was in the first 20 years in Wicomico County. And I went to Fort Meade, and they give us all these nice looking uniforms, Army uniforms, and pretty pair of shoes. So they put us on a train, and I ended up in Mississippi. And they put us on this truck and carried us into this. They had just built this post in there, because the 99th Division had moved in there. I was with the 99th Division, and I stepped off that truck, and that red clay went all over my pretty shoes, and I thought, my God, where am I? What takes me there? So anyway, but I stayed there. I stayed with the Army until February 46, and then Mr. Aikens said, "We got a job for you." Which I said, "I want you to run that planing mill in there. You can do it." So I went in there, and then of course the planing mill kept going until 1967, and then all the lumber then I was buying from West Coast by the carload, and then we went into went over to the house building, and we built the first subdivision over to Hebron, Log Cabin Road.
So the first subdivision Aikens did was there on the end of Log Cabin Road?
Yes.
Right by Spring Hill Road?
Right by the cemetery there.
Yeah.
That was the first. And then, in 1970, Stanton Aikens, a good man. I enjoyed working for him, I'll tell you that. He said, "Henry, I want you to do something." I said, "What's that?" "I'm going to build a subdivision, and I've got pond there I'm digging." My Lord, they'd never dig that pond today, I can tell you that. And he said, "We're going to call it Deer Harbor." And he said, "I want you to go, and I'm going to build 200 houses there."
Yeah.
Richard Norman said, they asked him to get Richard and his crew starting to build houses. And I want to tell you, one of the greatest men I've ever met in my life was Richard Norman. I didn't have to go to college, because he showed me how to build houses and everything. And it was construction, and he was just a great guy. He's still living. I see him every once in a while, but he was a good partner. And then at about that same time, the Farmers Home Administration was furnishing homes for, paying for homes for different people. But if you had enough money to your income and everything to qualify, all you needed was enough money to pay for the lawyer. And we built a lot of Farmers Home Administrators' home everywhere, and that stayed. That was, I had 30 houses going one time. 30 houses going one time. But then I decided about 1982. I said 1982. I said, Stanton, 2 years from now, I'm going to be 62 years old, and I've had enough. I'm going to retire. He said, you can't do that. I said, yeah, I've got to. He said, in 1984, I'm going to be 62 years old. I've been with you 45 years. If I can't make a loaf of bread in 45 years, then I ought to go hungry. It's just what I told him. But he didn't want me to leave him. But I just felt like it's time. You got to know when to go home. So anyway, I retired at 62, and then that's how I got into politics.
Well, now you had been on the election board, had you not, while you were working at Adkins? Tell us a little bit about the election board experience.
Well, I got out of the Army in 1946, and Judge Bill Travis ran for the Senate. And my father was a very, very big supporter. My father was a big Democrat and a big supporter of Bill Travis. And Bill Travis won the senatorship in the fall of 46. So in February of 47, my father said to me, he said, Bill Travis is going to appoint you to the election board. I said, what? What is the election board? I didn't know what the election board was. I just come out of the Army, young, you know. He said, well, he wants the Parker family to have something, and I want you to have it. So William Lane, Preston Lane, was the governor, and he appointed me. So I went to my first meeting, and Judge King White was the chairman, and Mr. Stanley Robbins, another good job. I always liked Stanley Robbins, and he was a Republican on the board at that time. And we got to our first meeting, and they were talking about, each one of us got $300 a year. That was our pay. I didn't even know what was going on or anything. So we were sitting there, and they were talking about where to spend $28 for the post office, not for the mail, for the post office box. $28. So I sat there, and all at once, Mr. John Morris, who was a clerk, and he gave me a key. I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to go get the mail. That's going to be my job. But it was a key to get into the office if I wanted to get in. We only had 2 rooms in the election board. And Mr. John Morris, he's another great guy. He'd go down to White and Leonard, and if they had any fountain pens or any pencils or anything that they wanted to give away, he'd get them and bring it back for the election board. Save that money. That's what he'd do. But anyway, that was my first experience, and I stayed 30 years. I served under four Democrats and 2 Republicans. And
was it paper ballots back
it was
then?
paper ballots in those days, and that's when in 1950, that's when we had the big Mahoney fight, and we had over John, what's his name, George Mahoney.
George P. Mahoney?
Yeah. And they came to Wicomico County, the lawyers did and everything, to look at the ballots and everything.
Oh.
Yeah. They thought
it was very close?
Yeah, very close here, in 1950. But I stayed. It was, of course, then the state took all the elections over, and they had their own election board, state election board. They appointed that, and they asked me to be on that, and I told them no. And so they appointed a guy from Cambridge to serve from the Eastern Shore. But I got off, I guess, about 6 years. And when Joe Long was elected senator, another close buddy, he reappointed me to the election board, and I stayed long enough to decide I was going to run for the county council.
Now, when you decided to run for politics yourself, there was a history in your family of public service. Your father was in politics himself. Tell us about your dad.
Well, my dad he was in the House of Delegates in 1918, and he stayed there until 1922. And it says that the first money, there was 4 delegates, Judge Rex Taylor, Mr. Henry Roberts, and some man named Truitt from down in east side of the county, and my father. That was the 4 delegates. And they got a bill passed that they would get enough money to just make a study of a teacher's college in Salisbury. And that was in 1921.
Goodness gracious.
1921. And then in 1924, it was a couple of Republicans went to see my dad, and he said, "Tom, we want you to run for mayor." He said, "I can't run for mayor." He said, "I got a 3-grade education, just a 3rd grade education. I don't have any money, I don't have 1 nickel in my pocket right now." And he said, "Yeah, but Tom, you're honest, and we want you to be mayor." Well, he ran into some big politician, my dad did, and he said, "Tom, I understand that they're asking you to run for mayor." He said, "Yes, Mr. So-and-so has asked me to consider it," but she said, I don't think I'm going to. He said, "Well, you shouldn't do it." He said, "You don't have any education, you don't have any money." They said my dad looked at this guy, and he said, "I want to tell you something. Now, I'm going to walk out of here, out of this building where I'm talking to you, and I'm going to walk over to City Hall, and I'm going to fall for mayor. And then I'm going to get elected, and you don't get anything." And that's a true story. And of course, the biggest part about Phil was the park. My dad started the park, and he always wanted but back in before he was elected mayor, they wanted to start the sewer and water system in Salisbury. He wasn't mayor then. And of course, everybody in Salisbury had to run to the backyard to go to the bathroom. You know, that's the only thing we had in those days.
Yeah, outhouses.
I used it. I was there. And but he decided that he wanted to build a park. And he said, "I wanted to build a park so that the people from East Salisbury and from Rabbinaw," see, that was South Salisbury. They called it Rabbinaw in those days, where Pepsi-Cola is now and all that. "I want to build a park. They don't have any cars, and I want to have picnics. I want the families to go there and enjoy themselves, enjoy life." And he said, but he said, "I also want to buy that Shoemaker Pond, because we're going to need that water for City of Salisbury, for the sewer line and water line." So from Route 12, the whole way to Shoemaker Pond, he bought that for $5,000.
Goodness gracious.
Well, the people in Salisbury went crazy. Throw him out of Salisbury. He's wasting money, and he's the Parker Follies is what they called it. The
Parker Follies.
Parker Follies. So they said after he had heard enough of it, Colonel Frank Dryden was the engineer in those days. He said he turned to Frank Dryden and he said, "Frank, I don't know anything about building a park, but I want you to build a park, and I want you to start right now." He turned to Hooper Miles, who was the attorney for the city, and he says, "Hooper, you keep us out of jail. and, and that's a true story. And but he was very active in politics. He enjoyed the Democrat Party, but that was the big thing that he really started. Of course, he also, during his administration, they started the uptown firehouse.
Oh,
That they just moved out of. That was during his administration too, 1928.
hmm.
But he was very active in politics all of his life, But
So you had a little bit of family trait there when you decided to run for the Wicomico County Council.
well, I want to tell you about that. I was sitting there one night at home with Nellie, and I said, "Nellie, I'm going to do something." She looked at me, and I said, "I'm going to be a candidate for the county council." 1982, this was. I'm going to be a candidate for the county council this year. She looked at me and said, "You sick? Have you got a fever?" "I believe you're sick." I said, "Why? Why do you ever want to get in all that?" She said, "Well, we talked a little bit. She was a good politician, I can tell you that, because she come out of a big political family." And she said, "Well, if you want to do it, go ahead."
The Truitts, right?
Right, the
Yeah.
Truitts from Pittsville. They were and she said, "Well, go ahead if you want to do it." Well, I went to office a couple of days. I was still working for S. Agins then. And I said to Stanton, it was on a Saturday morning. I said, "Let's go in the back room and I want to talk to you a couple of minutes." He said, "Sure." So we went in the back room. I said, "Now, I'll tell you what I got on my mind." I said, in 2 years, I'm going to retire. I said, "I've told you that." I said, in 82, this is 82, but that's 84. I said, but in 82, this year, I said, it's February, and I want to become a candidate for the county council, and I hope I can get elected. And he looked at me and he says, you want to run for the county council?" I said, "Yeah." Now, he's a Republican,
Mm.
The Agins was big Republicans.
Oh, yeah.
He said, and I said, "Now, if you want me to take my pension early, I'll take it." But I said, "No, I want to take my pension at 62. And he said, "You're not going to take any pension. I want you to go ahead and run for the county council, and I'm going to give you the first $100 towards your campaign."
Well,
And that's what he did.
yeah. E. Stanton Atkins.
Yeah. He was a good man. He had a lot of. He loved Wycombe. He loved Wycombe County and Salisbury, and he worked hard for it. I can tell you that. Chamber of Commerce and everything. But he believed in helping people. And
Well, you had been president of the Chamber of Commerce yourself, hadn't you?
yeah, in 1972, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you ran for Wicomico County Council. I believe you led the ticket, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was headed to take it.
Did it have primaries then?
Oh yeah, we had. I think we had 6 Democrats running in the primary,
Mm-hmm.
and 5 of us won. And then I was top of the ticket, and then I ran again in 86, and then I ran again in 90 and in 94. In 90 is when we went to 7-member on the council. And you were on the council in 86. You come on, and Phil Tilghman did, but they, and I think the 1990 was probably the best council. It was a great council there.
Mm-hmm.
It was had a farmer, we had a banker, we had 3 business people, and it was the minority on there, and we just educator. It was just a good council.
Yeah.
I thought 1990 really was.
That first council was one of your big projects to decide where to put the new jail.
Yes, we were going through a lot because we had 100 and some prisoners, or inmates, I should say, up on the top of the courthouse. And Salisbury had to do something about it. And then, of course, there was a big project about they were going to build 11-story building that right there by the courthouse. And finally, after much discussion, the public was real after us, I tell you that hard. We decided to go ahead, and we went in Pennsylvania and saw the detention center and come back and built that detention center. And bought that piece of land on Naylor Mill Road and built the detention center there. And then we built the council built the sheriff's building there. And it was now I think they have 500 or 600 prisoners or inmates in there now. Yeah, inmates in there now. But anyway, that was one of the big things that was really that we had to do. We had to do. J. Shields was they built the detention center. Yeah, but
well, the complex, the sports complex that now it carries your name, the Henry S. Parker Complex. Tell us a little bit of the history about how that came to be.
Well, when I went on the first time in '82, there was a discussion by the council to build needed a sports complex to be built in Wicomico County. And there was a lot of discussion where they wanted to build it, one thing or another. When I'd known of this piece of property on Naylor Mill Road. So I said to Matt Kramer, I said, who owns that piece of property? He said, the city of Salisbury. I said, well, that's good. So I went across the hall and I went over to see my good friend Paul Martin, the mayor. I said, Paul, I want something. What do you want? He said. I said, that piece of land you got there on Naylor Mill Road, that 47 acres, I think it is, I want to build a sports complex on it. He looked at me a few minutes, said, build a sports complex? And he said, yeah. He said, I tell you, let's do it. He said, if it's good for Wicomico County, it's good for the city of Salisbury. That's just the words he said. That's kind of mayor he was. I tell you that. He worked very close with the county. I tell you that, trying to get things done. And of course, we had to help him every once in a while, but because that north end, we've all voted one morning and give him $1 million to put his sewer and water there. Look at it today, it's just. But anyway, that started and we decided we'd go ahead and build a sports complex there, and I'd go out every week with Gary Mackus, and we'd look at the trees, and I'd say, that tree ain't no good. Cut that tree down, you know, because I'd been in the timber business, see, or in the lumber business. And to come find out it was really well done, and it a lot of hard work to it, not by the public works, and also the roads division helped there in that too. And I'm so pleased that they did that for me back while I'm living. That's a big part. And I told them the day that they had the celebration named it for me. You don't do it by yourself. There are a lot of people down that road that's helped you before, and you don't do anything in life unless somebody helps you. That's my. So many people think they do it all by themselves. They don't do it, and it's best part of my.
So one other thing out there in that north end of town is the industrial park, and I think back of the efforts that the county made in economic development to attract different companies here to the industrial park and everywhere. And one of the ones that I know you worked very hard on was Grumman.
Oh yeah.
And Ed Urban and that group.
Well, see, now Grumman was back of the Civic Center. Now the industrial park was well started before I went on to county council, but then there was a shirt factory back of the Civic Center, and the shirt factory went out of business. And then Grumman wanted to come here and build parts for their airplanes, and there was a lot of discussion, and they decided they would come, and it started at I think it was about 6 or 7 of the employees from Grumman. They were in Long Island, would come there and start this business, and it was very successful. It was, and of course, they decided then that they wanted to get out of the business and sell it to somebody else. And they were really about ready to close that business, that building, everything. Drummond was. So Matt Kramer and myself and Ed Baker, we got on the airplane. We went to Long Island one Friday morning, and we spoke to the head vice president of Drummond. He came in, and I plead to him, please don't close that building. We've got to give us a little 6 months at least, and we'll try to get somebody to go there. Well, he was nice. He said, we're losing a lot of money there. I want you to tell that. That's what he said. Well, anyway, at the end of the day, finally we found somebody, company from Texas that came in and opened up and stayed there. Today, I think there's about 500 or 600 employees there. They tell me, or 400.
Yeah, they've just added on to it.
Right.
Harvard Manufacturing.
Yeah, Harvard Man. And if they'd have closed that, we'd never been had it open no more.
Yeah.
That's the biggest trouble. And not that we all did this, please. I don't know. It's just that if you're going to be in government, you've got to go do what's got to be done. I was president of the council then, and you just got to do it to keep things open. And it's just think about it, if that had been closed and how many people are working there today. And that's the whole thing.
Center of Salisbury. There was an awful lot of negotiations between the city and the county leading up to the development of the center of Salisbury. Can you reminisce about that a little bit? Remember the flyover and the roads, the state roads wanted a different way to enter the center of Salisbury, and Paul Martin. I think you and Paul Martin, if I'm not mistaken, and William Donald Schaefer had a lot of conversations about the.
Well, it was about the roads, how to get the traffic around there, and they wanted to come up and build this, so they would come from Delmarva and go over to the center. And finally, it was quite a discussion about it, and we had, I think we even had a lot of discussion in county council meetings, and but it was finally decided to do like it's done and like it is today. And Paul was a big supporter of the center, and the city of Salisbury had taken all that over for taxes and everything, which that's what it should be, you know. And but it was a lot of discussion about that. I remember that, and anyway, it finally worked out. It finally worked out.
The tourism and the Tourist Information Center. Tell us a little bit about that and the history of that. The tourism was in the Civic Center way back then.
Yes. Well, I was sitting there one day, and Betty Gardner, who was on the council, said, I want to do something about tourism. Well, I looked at her and I said, what's tourism? I'd never heard of such a thing in my life. No. And she said, and then she went on, and I said, well, she said, I want to do something. So the council decided to go ahead and start doing something about it. And then after we had it there at the Civic Center, like you said, and then they wanted to build a building so that people could come down from Delaware on going towards Florida or anything, because they'd stop into something. So anyway, we looked at this. We were over to Solomon's Island, and this restaurant there looked just like, well, not like, but just about like what Tourism Center looks today. And the guy came and looked at it, and they decided to go ahead. The council decided to go ahead and build that building that's got that sort of light up on the top of it, like
Lighthouse,
like a lighthouse, and everything, and that's how they started. But it really one of the looks came from Solomon's Island, where it came from.
Yeah.
And because it was a beautiful restaurant in Solomon's Island, and But tourism has really grown. I was reading this morning where they're going to have a big discussion today at the county council about the tourism, how much it's meant to Wicomico County and the employee and the different businesses here and one thing and another. And I think it's a great thing myself anymore. It's really been built. I mean, it's really been built up, but that's how we got the looks of that tourism center. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, Henry, while you were on the county council, you were elected statewide as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in 1982, the council has one appointment to go to the legislative committee of Maryland Association of Counties. And the Maryland Association of Counties meet from January to April, every Wednesday, about bills and what's going to happen in Annapolis to affect the counties. So I took that, the council said, I said I'd like to do that, so I did. And I stayed 16 years on the legislative committee at the Maryland Association of Counties. And they decided that I should become an officer, and you work your way up. You don't just be a printed president. You start as secretary and treasurer, and you work your way up. So in 1993, I was president of the Maryland Association of Counties. And I really enjoyed it. It was a great thing. I stayed 16 years. I met some of the greatest guys I ever met in my life. And we really enjoyed life together. And I said to them the day I left, I'm not going to miss the county council, but I'm going to miss the Maryland Association of Counties. Because there was just, and then it's not only that, but the people that you meet in state government, and some of them you might not want to meet anymore, I'll tell you that. But anyway, most of the time they were good people that you could talk with and try to get something done. And of course, the year I was president, I really, you had to go around about 3 or 4 breakfasts with the governor and talk with the governor and for breakfast.
Who was governor then?
William Donald Schaefer. And he have we'd take the whole board. He wanted the whole board of not the whole board, but the officers, and we'd go there and have breakfast with him and talk to him. He wanted a little something support from the Maryland Association of Counties on a bill he had or something, you know. That's what was happening. And I got a very close friend with William Donald Schaefer. I got a Christmas card from him, and I sent him one this year. He's at a nursing home now.
Charlestown.
Yeah. And he's we were good buddies. We were good buddies. I remember the day that I'm going back up a little bit now, Phil. Remember the day that Winter Place, we had bought that piece of land there in Winter Place, and you were there. You helped. The whole council did. And he came down to look around Wicomico County. He was down in Wicomico County a lot because he stayed a lot in Wicomico County. And we got off the bus, and that was before the road was ever built in there or anything. And I said, Governor, let me ask you something. If we put a road in here and we might have businesses in here and the recreation parks, they want to build parks in here, one thing and another, he said, you go for it. It's the greatest thing you could do. That's the way he was. Go for it right now, he said. So that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
And but he'd come down. If businesses looked like they were going to open, he'd come and speak to them and like that.
Yeah. Very progressive.
Yeah.
Very progressive government.
And that Winter Place Farm, I want to tell you, that was one of the greatest things that council ever did when they bought that piece of land there. You look at it today with the businesses and the parks there and everything. It's just beautiful park.
Wasn't it kind of history repeating itself though? Because there were a lot of detractors who said the county shouldn't spend. I guess every park that's ever been bought, they said the same thing.
Phil said, I said, Phil, one morning, one of our
critics,
yeah, that's what I want to say, was talking real bad, but we was going to throw away money and one thing and another. And Phil said I come up on my chair that morning and pointed the finger right at me. Phil always said I had a finger I wanted to point at people. He said, "You don't have a bit of vision."
Oh my goodness.
Well, anyway.
Joe Long.
Okay. Well, Joe Long came from Delmarva. He was 14 and I was 11. 12 and I was 11. And we met each other in the corner of Charles Street and Church Street in East Salisbury. And we got and we were friends for 75 years. Joe just died. And every morning or every day, I either talked to him or he talked to me just about if we were around town or anything. We talked about politics or who we didn't like, one thing and another, anything that we want to talk about, us two would talk about. But Joe Long was one of the greatest friends I've ever met in my life. I want to tell you that.
And of course, Mabel worked with you at E.S. Atkins.
Yeah, Mabel was the secretary for the corporation and she was there 30 years with E.S. Atkins. Mm-hmm. And she was secretary of the corporation, E.S. Atkins Corporation, and she's a very intelligent person. I tell you that. E.S. Atkins needed her.
Lewis Riley.
Oh, Lewis, he's a good friend. He's a good friend. I met him when when he was with the council, county council, and then he went on to be a House of Delegates and senator, and of course he's had quite a career with the agriculture department in the state of Maryland. But Lewis is a good old hard farmer. He's a good friend, and he's very close. And I like Lou.
Yeah.
I like Lou. I really do. I like him. I had lunch with him about 6 months ago, and we sat there and we talked and everything.
There's another one came out of East Salisbury, name of Norman Conway.
Oh yeah. Well, Norman was born on Baker Street. I keep telling him that. We all come off of Baker Street, and when we say Baker Street, that's poor people. That's what we said, because we're all poor. And but Norman has worked hard in his life. He sold newspapers, and then he went on to be with the education system. And now he's one of the leaders in the state of Maryland, in the General Assembly. And I want to tell you something. If Norman Conway ever leaves the post there, Wicomico County is going to suffer, because he helps Wicomico County. Mm-hmm. And that's the part about all of it. Norman is a great, he's a good friend, and good friend.
Yeah. Your late other friend from the House of Delegates, Bennett Bosman.
Oh yeah, Bennett.
Now he preceded you as president of the Maryland Association of Counties.
Yeah. When I first went up to the Maryland Association of Counties, Bennett was already there. He got elected 4 years before which would make it in '78. He got elected, and he was on the legislative committee, and we got to be real close. And he told after for a while there, he stayed with the county commissioners there in Worcester County, and then he decided he wanted to run for the House of Delegates, and we were coming back from coming home in the car from Annapolis one day, and he got running his mouth. We said, "Why don't you run for the House of Delegates?" He said, "I'm going to do it." So he went and followed right away. That's how we got it. And he was a good delegate too. Uh-huh. He's a good delegate. He helped Wicomico County. I'll tell you that. And of course, a good friend. He died too about a couple of years ago. But he was a good man. Good man.
The years you went to the Maryland Association of Counties Legislative Committee, I believe somebody went with you by the name of Matt Kramer.
Yeah. Well, Matt's a good friend. Matt, when I came on the county council, Matt was administrator, and then he was until he decided he'd retire, and then now he's back with the county council. But we went to Annapolis every time we had to go to Annapolis. Matt and myself, we went together. the people in Annapolis, he had a lot of friends in Annapolis. He knew how to get into doors and talk to people, and he was a good man. I'll tell you that, and he's still a good man. But he was a good man for Wicomico County when he was administrator. And I'll never forget when I first got elected. I told him one day, I said, Matt, I want to tell you something now. They've made me president of this council, but I'm not going to run Wicomico County. That's not my job. You're going to do it. But I don't want to walk down Main Street and hear something and somebody say something to me and I don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. That's just the word I told him. Mm-hmm. And he was a good friend. We got along real good.
So the first time you were elected, you led the ticket and became president of that council.
Right. And
that council had 5 members.
5 members, right.
And
all Democrats.
And then now let's see, who was on that council? Bruce Ruart?
Bruce Ruart, Betty Gardner, Dick Laws, and Jack Morris.
Then, well, that was a good council. Then the next council also had 5.
Yeah, and that was Phil Tilghman and Julia Foxwell, Betty Gardner, and Jack Morris.
Yeah. Now, it was during that council that there was a voting rights suit, and it was settled by deciding to district Wicomico County into 5 districts,
right,
including a minority district.
Right, and 2 at large.
And 2 at large.
Right. And that's when we went to the 7.
Yeah.
It went to the 7 member then, and that was 1990 when we had the first election of 7. 5 districts and the 2 at large.
Yeah.
And we both of us ran at large in 1990.
Right.
Yeah, we ran and that was a good council. I'll tell you that. I tell everybody that. That's a lot of people said, well, 7 members is not. It's not good at all. But we had a good council, and we got some things done. I thought we got some things done, but it's a different thing now. I think
there was some fear that on some rural people, that the 5 districts, which had to include some people in order to get enough people to make a district, had to come toward Salisbury. A lot of people, including some from Willards, thought that the council would be dominated by the metropolitan area. Right. But it didn't turn out that way. It's very, very diverse as far as areas represented, isn't it?
I was running in Sharptown that election. I remember it just well as anything. We were there. They had some kind of a political meeting, or they invited us all to go. And some lady said to me, "Are you going to, when you get elected, are you going to represent Salisbury, or are you going to represent Wicomico County?" And I said, "Lady, I want to tell you, if I'm elected, I'm going to represent all the people in Wicomico County because they're taxpayers." That's the word I said. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's the things you've got to look at. You got to look at the citizens and the taxpayers, what it means to them. And if you and sometimes you can't vote like that because it's different things that's not going to make it. But that's the 2 things when you sit on the county council that you want to think about. And it's not where you're Democrats or Republicans. That's what gets me anymore. It's you got to support the citizens and the taxpayers, and that's why you're elected, to go up there and do that. Mm-hmm. No matter who you are, that's what you're up there for. Don't get me going doing it.
Henry, you lived a pretty good life, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. First thing, God's blessed me with good health. I've had a few cuts around. They've cut on me a little bit, but I've had a good life, and I've been very healthy, and God's been for that. But I never wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to be comfortable, and I wanted to do things in life that I wanted to do. But the biggest things outside your families is health, and your friendship. That's the biggest thing in life. Of course, I was married 58 years to a lady who was a great person. And she died, and then 5.5 years now, I've been associated with another great lady, and we're enjoying life together. But at 86, I want to live as long as I can. I'm happy. I want to live. I don't want. Some people want to die. I don't know why they want to die, but I want to live. I cripple around a little bit, but I remember my good friend, Governor Millard Toss. He was a great guy, another great man. I liked him, and he liked me. And at his older age, we'd meet at a dinner or something, and I'd say, Governor, how are you making out? My Lord, Henry, how are you? I don't know if I'm fine. He said, you know something? He said, I get up every morning. If my name's not in the obituaries, I've lived through the night. Well, that's the way, at 86 like I am, that's what you got to look at. But I want to say one more thing, and I'm done. Wicomico County is a great county, and people don't realize how important and how great Wicomico County is. I've been here all my life, 86 years, and I love Wicomico County. I bet.